Holy cow, what's all this cherry for? It's kind of laid out with markings, cut lines. Let's find out. Hey YouTubers, welcome to the channel. Thanks for stopping by. Surrounding me is a bunch of cherry that I cut down years ago, and I have an order for a special table for a special someone in the family. So let me take you through the process. So as with any complicated project, you really want to start with some idea of how much wood you're going to need, lengths, widths, etc., so you can cut out your different parts. So what I've done is I've drawn up a side view of a table that's going to be 24 inches high, 14 inches wide. The top will be 15 inches wide with rounded over edges. The two end panels will have a solid panel in the middle, so I'm going to be doing that in cherry. Looking at a front view, we have the tabletop here, we have a middle shelf and a bottom shelf. So what I've done is I've started to lay out rails and stiles on some of this wood. Here's a piece that I'm going to be using for part of the table shelf. So the first thing I need to do is cut some of the waste material off of these pieces, get them into a rough shape, and do flattening either with the jointer or in combination with the surfacing planer. For some of these smaller parts, I just want to get one straight edge so I can cut off some of the waste material, get them down to a more manageable size before I start planing. Now my two shelves are not going to be solid stock. They're actually going to be kind of framed with a book matched inset panel. And I need to split my wood in half to do that, but you can see there's a little bit of rocking going on here, so we're going to have to flatten one side of our board first. And as you can see, this has a pretty good amount of twist. I would say almost 1/4 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is simply fasten this panel down. Put another brace here and we'll work on the top. To book match this piece, I'm first going to be running the board and cutting slots top and bottom so that I don't have so much to cut out in the middle with the bandsaw. Before I glue these up, I'm going to run them through the planer and knock these high edges down. More panels need to be flattened, so I'm going to run them through the planer. And then we'll go back to the table saw and cut relief notches in here to make the bandsawing easier. For the rails and stiles, I'm going to be running them across the jointer, and I have a lot of pieces here to work with. And what I wanted to look at first was the grain orientation on these boards, so when I'm running them through the joiner, I'm not getting a lot of chip out. Now this panel for one of the shelves has a lot of character, better known as defects. These are little tiny cracks in the wood. But down at this end I have kind of like some kind of insect damage. So what I'm going to do is mix up some cherry stain with a little bit of plastic wood and use that as a filler. I've gotten to the point where I'm ready to start profiling the rails and stiles for the end panels. So this is a cutter for rails and stiles, and the distance from the bearing to the tip of the cutter is 3/8 of an inch. So what we need to do on the panel, since the stiles are 9 inches apart, we need to add 3/8 on each end. So we're going to cut our rails to 9 3/4. For our side pieces, they need to be 23 inches long because we're subtracting an inch for the top. So I've run a test piece through, and the way that the bit is set up, I need to run this face down. So I'm looking at all of my pieces to see which side of a face do I want to run through that cutter. So I'm looking for the straightest grain to try to eliminate any chip out. So once I get all these oriented, we'll run them through. Now to do the ends of the stiles, I have to line up that bit where the panel goes and put some backup material on this when I run it through. So on my test cut, I noticed there is a little lip here and here. So I'm going to change the height of the bit and run it again. I know I have a little bit of issue here because my stock is a lot thicker than normal. Normal rails and stiles might be 3/4 of an inch. I am just under an inch. But that could be sanded off. Well, it was totally messed up, and that's why we do test cuts. This whole thing has to be shifted. The bit has to be shifted. So we're going to go try it again. Time now to cut the panels to width and length. Some of these joints didn't get as tight as I wanted to. Part of that is the result of, I think, a poor router bits. So what I'm going to do is add some glue in here and sand that. Hopefully some of that dust fills in those cracks. The sides to the shelf need to be 35 inches long, so I'll cut those next. Now the shelves are to be 14 inches wide, so I'm going to be joining these pieces with biscuits and then using a bit like this, I'm going to cut a rabbet around the inside of the frame in order for the panel to be glued onto. Then I'm also going to be putting some braces in here for extra stability. Before I think about doing any biscuit work, I'm going to do some adjustments. I don't want the heel of this cutter touching the ground, so I want to get a space here and adjust this so it just clears, and then I'll cut a piece of this stock and put it on the tail. That'll keep this level. What I want to do is dry clamp this together and see if I can run the router with this just being held with clamps, because I really don't want to glue this thing up yet. So put some clamps on here. Check for fit, and then we'll be back. I don't know if you noticed, but when I was trying to saw two of these at one time, my bottom piece started to work its way out, resulting in a miscut. So I've had to glue a small piece on the end, and I will recut that to width. Also, in order to get these panels to fit, I have to do a round over on this corner to match this. Now luckily I have a circle template, and I can find the size circle I need, and I'm going to take that, and with a sharp pencil I'm going to draw a radius on that corner, cut that out, and use this piece as my template. And that'll be clamped to these panels. I'd say that's a pretty good fit. I decided not to do one or two center supports since that span's only about 9 inches, so I think we'll be fine. We'll get into the glue up. So this is one of the end panels, and the tabletop will be here. In order to secure the tabletop, I have these 2 rails that will go in here, and the top will be attached to that here. So I'm going to cut some slots in here for the biscuits. Take 2. So this is where one of my face rails needs to go, and I want it not to be parallel at the top, but slightly in. So what I'm going to do is mark here where the slot needs to be and adjust the cutter accordingly. Okay, that lines up with a little notch here. It may be hard to see. I'll tighten this up. We're ready to drill our first biscuit. And what I've had to do is add a piece of wood across here, because getting this centered to do my cut, this part of the blade actually falls off the corner. So we are all set up now, and we're ready to do our first biscuit cut. And so to test my cut, I put in a biscuit, lined it up, and that's what I'm going to shoot for. We'll do the rest of the corners and be done. Now this bottom piece acts more of a brace. So instead of it insetting it, I'll make it flush, and I have readjusted the depth of cut, so we should be flush. Doing a dry fit of the casework, I have marked spots on both panels where I'm going to be cutting the neck slots for the middle shelf. In order to attach the tabletop, I'm going to cut some slots in both end panels and on these rails, and we'll attach clips to those at the end of the project. For the center shelves, I've marked where I need to cut biscuits, and we'll do that across there. I've laid down a straight edge so everything stays in alignment. Since I'm going to be staining these panels, I don't want to get excess glue drying anyplace. It would affect taking the stain. So what I'm doing is just masking areas So if there's any glue that spreads out, I can wipe that off and it won't get on the wood. For the hold down clips for the tabletop, I'll have a screw. I'm going to be drilling a hole bigger than the diameter of the screw, so there's some movement for seasonal changes in humidity, which is going to affect the tabletop either widening or shrinking. So we're going to drill these holes and then we'll be done. Last thing I want to do is cut this tabletop to width and length. I have sanded the top to 150 grit, and I'm seeing a little bit of scratch lines from the drum sander. So what I'm going to do is, it's called water popping. Let's dampen the surface with a wet rag. Get the fibers to raise up a little bit. And then we'll come back resand. Let's see what it looks like. After sanding up to 150 grit, I thoroughly vacuumed everything, and now I'm using a shop towel and some mineral spirits. And this is the bottom part of the tabletop. Which, I think I sanded this to probably 100 or so, maybe 120. You can see I'm picking up some dust. So we're going to go over every inch of this furniture and wipe it down. And before I come back with stain, I'm going to go over it with a tack cloth. So when you're staining, make sure you keep your stain well stirred. If it's a bigger project, you may see your colors kind of sink to the bottom a little bit. So what I will be doing is applying this with a cotton rag. And I'll be using my shop towel to wipe it off. On bigger tables, you might use an applicator pad like this and attach it to your orbital sander. My project's not that big, so I'm actually going to just be using a combination of a hand application with this rag, and over on the case itself, there's a couple little areas that are hard to get to, so I'll use a paintbrush to get in there and then wipe it down. So now I'll just go over this with my shop cloth. This is the underside of the tabletop, so I'm not really worried about it too much. And I didn't spend a lot of time sanding it, so there's a lot of imperfections here, but once that's wiped down, we can flip this over and do the other side. There's an area here that looked like it had maybe some glue stains, so I used a card scraper and scrape that away. Now we'll see if that fixed the problem. Yeah, that looks a lot better. With this turned upside down, I can just finish up and we'll be letting this dry for, I don't know, close to a day. We'll see how it is tomorrow afternoon, 12 hours or so from now. So we'll be back. With the stain totally dry, I'm going to go over it with the tack cloth. And then we're going to apply our first coat of polyurethane, which I'm going to thin down with mineral spirits. So I'm not sure how much finish I'm going to need, so I'm going to start out with just a small amount. I'll take that, put it in here, and we're going to do a 50-50 mix. Stir that up, be ready to start applying our finish. After that first coat, I'm going to give it a light wipe down with some of this maroon Scotch pad. You could use 4.0 steel wool if you wanted to, or probably some 600 grit sandpaper, but I'm just kind of trying to hit any nubs or dust, knock them off. So we'll vacuum this and use a tack rag and then go back and give it another coat. So I've just finished sanding with a 400 grit sandpaper and vacuumed it up. And now I'm just going to clean this with mineral spirits. See how much dust is picked up by this rather than using a tack cloth. You can see there's a little bit on there, so we're going to go over to the rest of the cabinet, clean that up, and then I'm going to come back and instead of using a 50-50 mix of urethane and mineral spirits, I'm going to add a little bit more urethane so that the third coat is a little thicker. So by volume in my can, I probably have about 3/4 of an inch of 50-50 mix. I'm going to add about a 1/2 inch more of pure urethane. After giving this several applications of a hand wipe finish and intermittently going over it with wet sanding with 400 grit, I'm going to do a final spray job using urethane. I bought this furniture repair kit, and what I want to do is use that to fill small cracks like that. And I'm going to do another video to see how that works. So for now, let's get started on that. To fasten the top, I'm going to be putting in these clips. And I'm not going to put them tight against the wall, but bring them out just a little bit. Pre-drill the hole. And I put some tape on the end here for a depth stop for the screws I'm using. So go around and we'll finish that up. thanks for visiting the channel today and sticking with me as I finished up this end table made from cherry. If you've enjoyed the video and perhaps learned something or two, give it a thumbs up and a like. Consider subscribing, and we'll catch you on the next video. Again, thanks for stopping by.